do is reinstall the expansion tank. So this is a very easy, simple part of the process. Basically, you're going to want to make sure that you have your rubber seals greased up, put the cap on, and simply push down. As easy as that. You're going to want to remove the cap after that, so then you can reinstall the top cover that secures the expansion tank in place. Make sure that everything is properly secured, and then you can reinstall your torque set screws. You're definitely going to want to check just to make sure that the cap fits on properly. That will definitely tell you if your top cover is reinstalled properly. But once you have done all that, you can get your torque set screw, start to screw everything back down, make sure everything's tight. The expansion tank is going to be under pressure, so you want to just make sure that nothing's going to end up leaking. The tank won't be able to move itself out of its seat. Everything's going to heat up and expand and shrink, so definitely with plastic you want to make sure everything's secured. But once you're done, you're just going to reinstall your radiator cap, and that's it. Alright guys, so what we're going to do is go ahead and work on the water pump. Basically there's a large O-ring, so you're going to want to go ahead and try to grease that up. If you try to force this in by hand, it's not going to work. A little extra grease on the port that the water pump sits in will help. And I found that it's easiest to go ahead and start threading in your bolts, and then what you're going to do is end up using the bolts to tighten down the water pump in a circular fashion. For me, I decided to also spray some PV Blaster inside the threads to make sure that they're clean, along with the new bolts, because the issue that I had in the last video. So after you've gotten all of them threaded in slightly, you're going to want to go ahead and tighten down everything in a circular fashion. This will help work in the water pump with the O-ring without damaging it. So this method I found to be very effective with reinstalling the water pump. Alright guys, so you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that your water pump is properly tightened, and then once that's sorted out, we can go on to the thermostat housing. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure that your thermostat housing is clean. For me, I had a little bit of gunk on my bolts, so I decided to spray some PV Blaster inside the threads and thread the bolts in and out just to make sure that everything's clean. You want to make sure the threads are clean so that everything gets properly tightened down. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and apply a little bit of silicone to the thermostat housing so we can apply the gasket. Now we can go ahead and apply the gasket, and this will help with the install and holding the gasket in place. Now we're going to go ahead and work on cleaning up the thermostat housing location again, basically make sure there's no oil. This will be affected by the silicone that we're going to apply to the other side of the gasket. Now we're going to get ready to install the thermostat. Notice that the thermostat has an arrow on top. You're going to want to line that arrow up with the top bolt and the closest bolt for the thermostat housing. Once you install the O-ring, you can apply the silicone to the other side of the gasket, and this will help create a second barrier to help seal the thermostat housing to make sure that there's no leaks. You're going to go ahead and install all the bolts, and that will help you keep the thermostat housing in place so that you can screw the bolts in. Alright, so now that you have all the thermostat housing bolts in, you're going to go ahead and hand thread them down just to make sure that everything is fit in properly. Double check everything to make sure it's fitting in its correct location, and then go ahead and tighten down the thermostat housing. Basically, it's good to go in a cross fashion to make sure that you properly tighten down the thermostat housing and make sure that there's no leaks. Alright, now once you've gotten everything tightened, just double check to make sure everything's good, and then we can go on to the water pump pulley. For my setup, I decided not to pull the tensioner for the water pump and the power steering pump because I found that that would be easier for me to remove and reinstall the water pump pulley. So what you're going to want to do here is basically get your bolts and thread in one bolt while putting a little bit of tension to properly seat the water pump pulley in place. And then once you've gotten one bolt in, you can reinstall all 4 bolts and begin to tighten them. So this is where this is convenient because the tension between the power steering pump, the crank, and the water pump pulley will hold it in place so that you can tighten it down. Next, we're going to go ahead and reinstall our clutch fan, which notice it is installed towards the passenger direction. now that the fan clutch is fully threaded on, you can go ahead and use your fan clutch tool to finally go ahead and tighten it. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and reinstall the radiator, making sure the two bottom mounts sit in their proper location. Once that's done, then you can go ahead and reinstall the top mounting bracket that's plastic for the radiator. Once everything is lined up, you can go ahead and grab your two 10mm screws on top and go ahead and start working at them. So once you've gotten all this done and tightened up, you're going to want to go and move on to the two lower radiator hoses, because the top one you want to end up leaving off. Basically with the top one, I like to leave that one off so it allows me to pour the coolant through the top section of the radiator hose so that I can fill up the engine as much as possible with coolant. So once this is done, you can go ahead and start filling the expansion tank with some coolant, and once that's filled up to a decent amount, then you'll want to go ahead and move over to the top radiator hose. The thing with filling up the top radiator hose is this will help out with the bleeding process. We'll basically put some coolant in the engine. You also want to jack up the car to help it bleed out. That's the best way I found with the M42s. Alright, so already started. Yay! Didn't blow up. You guys can see the coolant went down just a little bit. Sounds pretty good for not being started in a couple days.
Yeah, it sounds great. Like, I wouldn't expect this sound to come out of this car.
There you go, 1100 RPMs approximately. Again, sounds pretty mean. Got it warmed up just a bit. A little bit of surging just because still need to work on the tune a bit more. Plus I'm bleeding out the coolant system, so I'm gonna cap it off pretty soon. I think that should be about good. And I'll cap it off and let it bleed itself out. Leave it right there for now. Once it warms up past that point, it will start idling better. Plus I have the blower motor on, so again I still need to go back into the idling settings for the voltage, fill out my map, and then I purchased the complete version or registered version of Tuner Studio, so now I can do a lot more things with this. But with no load on it, sounds pretty good, so just waiting for this thing to bleed out and we'll be good. Alright, checking right now to see if I see any leaks. I don't see any. The ground was wet before from some coolant. guys can see, I'm going 0 miles an hour. And well, the car feels pretty good. Definitely can tell a difference in the way the tube's affecting the car now that the coolant is refreshed, the water pump's refreshed, the coolant system's running how it's supposed to. Car definitely feels like it is running how it should be.